What is up, everybody, and welcome to the Blogger Bowl Week 11 recap show. I thought I changed that.
That's all right.
There we go, recap show.
There it is.
It's the right one. Now, I'm Dan, that is Matt, and we are here, man. We only have like 2 weeks left.
I was writing every week on Bleacher Nation. I do a recap, like college football, bullets of the weekend. And yeah, that was it. That was how I started my post. Like, holy hell, we only have 2 weeks of the regular season left. Where the hell did the time go?
The wheat, I would say the wheat is separating itself from the chaff, but one, I don't really know what that means, and two,
Never heard that one.
The good teams keep winning. So we'll start at the top, and like we did in the preview show, I feel like I want to talk about these two teams separately. Michigan 24, Penn State 15. Still don't know how good Michigan is.
Yeah,
for all the bluster and crying about Harbaugh and tweeting bet and all that kind of stuff was a workmanlike performance. I don't think we really got any answers about Michigan beyond what we already knew. They're very good on defense. They're very physical on offense. They have an identity. They're going to want to go out, punch you in the mouth. I will say it is very, very impressive to go out and win that game with ease. I will give them that much. It was a very Michigan performance. We still don't know how they're going to perform against teams that can do anything on offense. We don't know what's going to happen if they're in a close game, but all you can do is beat the teams in front of you, and that score line was misleading. This was a one-sided, maybe not as
I don't want to. I wouldn't go one-sided because Penn State's defense, and we're going to give James Franklin crap, and rightfully so, and we're going to give Drew Aller crap, and rightfully so. Penn State's defense was very good. They played a very good football game and they had the one bad breakdown on 3rd and 11 when Donovan Edwards ran for the touchdown, and then they had when James Franklin, of all the times to decided to go for it when his defense was playing their best football and give Michigan the ball back on the 27-yard line with 4.5 minutes left and 3 timeouts. That's when he decides to go for it. Big letdown spot. Blake Corum rips off a run. Like, that's going to happen sometimes. Penn State's defense played really well. So I don't want to – it wasn't two-sided, but it also wasn't one-sided, if that makes sense. Because Penn State's defense played their asses off.
The score was still misleading because of Penn State's inability to do anything on offense.
Fair. That part's fair.
I mean, Michigan is just still, before we get to the James Franklin thing, still kind of just, all right, they're going to beat Maryland this week.
Yeah, it was the Ohio State game. It reminded me a lot of the Ohio State game, except the Ohio State game was Marvin Harrison Jr. doing awesome things, and in the Michigan game, it was Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards doing awesome things. It's like both teams. I don't say the narrative, I don't know how many people are pushing this, but a lot of people were that, Michigan's the best team in the country because they have all these dominant stats, and Minnesota, PJ Fleck saying, Michigan's the best team he's ever seen in his college coaching career. I don't think that level of good is something we saw from Michigan this weekend, but it looked exactly like the Ohio State win to me. It was a defensive battle, and in the end, they had the offense to get by a good defense and a really, really pathetic offense in Penn State. That was one of the worst performances I've ever seen. But their defense was really impressive. Their run game was really impressive. I still haven't really seen J.J. McCarthy go out and win them a football game, and he didn't have to do that in this point. Maybe he doesn't have to against Ohio State. I'm not really sure, but for a quarterback who I think has lost one football game in his career at Michigan, I'm still waiting to go see him go win the big football game.
Yeah, my internet just completely crapped out. Am I still with you?
Yeah, I think so. Frozen-ish. Kind of got you. Yeah, you're here.
Oh, my computer just bugged out on me. I'm going to check something real quick here and see if
that's
if
all right.
Okay. And if
I can hear you.
I'm just going to talk even though
we can hear you. Your face is frozen on the screen, but I can hear you a little bit muffled up. Oh, you're back. Dan's back.
All right, it's completely frozen on my end, so my computer's totally frozen. So hold on 1 second.
That's all right. I will just keep talking a little bit about the Michigan and Penn State game. Like I said, I think Penn State's defense was phenomenal. I think Michigan's defense was phenomenal, and there's this whole storyline of Michigan went out and ran the football and didn't throw the football because they didn't have to, but I'm aware they came away with that win without having to throw the football, but it's not like they were just dominating the game in their running game. It's not like they were able to pull away from Penn State and end the game because of just running the football. I do think at some point they're going to have to throw the football. They're going to have to prove they have a competent passing game to go along with that dominant running game, because That's what it's going to take to beat Ohio State. And is Kyle McCord C.J. Stroud? Absolutely not. And Michigan State's not a very good opponent, but we saw that offense for Ohio State start to do some good things. We saw Kyle McCord play his best game of the year, and Ohio State has the best weapon in the country in Marvin Harrison Jr. They probably have the best number 2 wide receiver in Emeka Egbuka in college football as well. They have an elite tight end in Cade Stover, and they have a tight end, a defense similar to Penn State's that's going to be able to go out and play smash mouth football and match Michigan's physicality, I would think. They weren't able to do that 2 years ago in Ann Arbor. Last year, eventually, they got worn out. This year's defense feels a little bit different. This year's defense feels a little bit more complete, a little bit more like it has that tough, physical, hard-nosed effort. So it was an impressive win for Michigan, but I think for the most part, there's still something left to be desired, still something that we need to see, because as nice as a win of that was, it should have been a little bit more dominant. If Michigan is the team that everybody wants to say they are, everybody claims that they are to be. That was an offensive performance from Penn State they should have been able to take more of an advantage of. Let's see, is Dan coming back here? Device is not connected. That's Dan. There he is.
Sort of.
We got you close. At least we got your voice.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with my my other computer right now. It is completely crapped the bed. Let me unplug these, and plug them back in. Maybe that'll help. I don't know.
If we only have your audio, we only have your audio.
Yeah, I mean, what's going to suck is that my internet quality on the laptop's not great. Nevertheless,
you're sounding good now.
Well, that's good. I like to sound good. That's all that really matters at the end of the day.
The Deep Dive logo looks lovely as well.
Yeah, that's our standard. Because, to peel back the onion for a second, the Deep Dive, it used to just be the Deep Dive channel before it became the Bets Birch channel. So that's why. Yeah, I don't know what's going on there. Yeah, whatever. So I'm really struggling right now. Anyway,
just to clarify, while you're setting everything up and wrapping up there, getting everything ready, what I was just kind of talking about was similar to what I was talking about when you hopped off. Michigan's offense still left a whole lot to be desired for me, and while we know that they have a very good running game, I think they're going to need to bring more than that when they play Ohio State in a couple weeks. And I was pushing back a little bit on this narrative that Michigan didn't have to throw the ball to win that football game. And I kind of pushed back on that a little bit, because yes, they did win that football game, but it's not like they were able to really pull away from Penn State with that running game. Like, that was a football game until the fourth quarter. Penn State was always just one drive away from tying that thing up. So I kind of pushed back a little bit on Michigan was just being disrespectful and flexing their muscles. That's kind of not how that came off to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I think to me, this comes down to this being about James Franklin and Penn State. They've got a James Franklin problem. Michigan respected the Penn State offense so little, they didn't throw a single pass after the halfway point of the second quarter. They knew they could do what they needed to on the ground, and that Penn State was not a threat with a quarterback who just isn't very good right now. Maybe Drew Allar will be good down the road, but it turns out that as a guy who's a first-year starting quarterback, he's not very good. But at the same time, they were very conservative in just about everything that they did. He played it so conservatively at home, did James Franklin, that he only went for fourth downs when he got bullied by the home crowd. He kicked a field goal from the 3. He punted on a 4th and 1. He punted on a 4th and 2. And at a certain point, you have to do something to try to steal an extra set of downs, an extra possession, whatever. And he just wouldn't do it. And they just didn't do it in this game. Bo Pelini served as a cautionary tale in college football for what can happen when you fire a decent coach expecting more. No, Penn State should not fire James Franklin. I don't know who they can hire to take him to the next level, frankly. But at a certain point, he's got to win the games that matter. And the gap between them and Penn State and now Michigan, it seems like it's just getting wider and wider and wider. And you can't I don't expect you to beat Ohio State and Michigan every year, but
you got to do it sometimes.
You got to do it at some point. Yes, the divisions are gone next year, but they replaced Michigan with Washington and USC. Yes, the playoff expansion means that 10-2 might get them into the expanded playoffs. But if they want to legitimately contend for national titles, James Franklin has to find another level. And I don't know that he's capable of it. Excuse me. They fired Yurcich, the offensive coordinator. They need to be a little bit more progressive on offense, I think. But you bring in a new guy, it didn't work. And
it's like his third offensive coordinator in fifth in like 10 years or something like that too. So like At some point, it's not. There might be a bigger problem than the offensive coordinator. I think it was so disappointing to me in that game too. I mean, we talked about on the show all year was Penn State's inability to hit the home run, make the big play. Like Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton were fine. I thought they ran the ball pretty well, and it seemed like most first downs, and again, this goes back to James Franklin and play calling and predictability. Most first downs were handoffs to one of those two guys, and most first downs they were dealing with a 2nd and 5. Like they were picking up yards, and that to me, like when you're able to get those yards, like obviously it's predictable, but like when you're able to get yourself into these second and manageable situations, I don't care what plays are being called. The quarterback has to be able to convert on those, and just way more often than not, Drew Aller wasn't even coming close. So for me, as bad as that game was coached, and as risk averse as James Franklin seemed, like, or I shouldn't say seemed, as he was, they were still getting themselves in second and manageable. It's not like Drew Aller was playing behind the chains. It's not like he was having 2nd and 12, 3rd and 13. There were a couple penalties, obviously, that put them there, but like they were being put in good spots. He was being put in good spots and still couldn't make throws, still couldn't make plays for the most part to get them down the field outside of the one drive I think it was to close out the first half. I think when they got in the end zone on the weird halfback pass that went for 3 yards, that was kind of hilarious. Drew Aller just like they say coach players sometimes take on the personality or the characteristics of their coaches, like mindset, I should say, mentality. Drew Aller looked kind of skittish. He looked a little bit scared. He looked a little bit unsure of himself, and he looked a little bit nervous. And that's pretty much exactly how James Franklin coaches every big game he's been in, at least against Michigan and Ohio State. So like, it's rubbing off on his quarterback.
Won't get an argument from me. How do I sound? How's everything?
Great. Perfect.
Good. All right. Georgia 52, Ole Miss 17. Let me set the stage for you, Matt. Ole Miss trailing 45-14 in the fourth quarter. They have a 4th and 5 from the Georgia 12. Caden Davis comes in and boots a 29-yard field goal to cut the deficit to 28 with 8:50 to go. I understand that makes it a 4-score game, but there's 8:50 left in the game. I don't really think that you're going to come back in this one by kicking field goals. So Lane Kiffin, you are not a serious person. He did one of the cardinal sins of college football this offseason. Instead of trying to build the best coaching staff around him, he hired someone he was familiar with. There's a reason Pete Golding isn't at Alabama anymore, and the Georgia offense just completely wrecked the Ole Miss defense. Georgia had a 0.5 EPA per play and a 67% success rate. The Ole Miss offense did some nice things early in the game, but the defense had no shot. Once again, Lane Kiffin has to decide who he wants to be. He's one of the greatest offensive minds in the sport, but he's always been the coach that's too online and never serious enough about winning these games. Anyway, good luck to him at Texas A&M. Matt, your thoughts on the Georgia Ole Miss game?
Man, that first drive was like really impressive from Ole Miss, and it was kind of like what you and I talked about in the preview show. Like they might be able to line up and run the football on Georgia because they run it really well. They have one of the best backs in the country, and Georgia's rushing defense has not been great. And then they moved down the field pretty easily, and then I think they had 1st and goal from like the 7, and they run it in easily, and then it gets called back for a holding to like 1st and goal from like the 17. Didn't matter. Judkins still ran it in like power left the next play for a touchdown. I was like, okay, this might be a little bit more interesting. But then Georgia we were waiting for Georgia to be Georgia. I feel like we've said that a couple times, and they were Georgia on Saturday night. That was a team that looked like they're the best team in the country. And you said, you still haven't seen it. Is there a little complacency starting to set in? If there was complacency starting to set in, if that was what the Missouri game was, Kirby Smart seemed like he coached it the hell out of them because that team was playing with I thought they played a very, very good football game. Brock Bowers was insane that he came back from ankle surgery 2 weeks later, caught a touchdown pass. They just kind of demolished Ole Miss for the most part.
I'm still worried about Georgia's run game and their defense. Like their offense is awesome, and we talked about it in the previous show. We've talked about it recently. Like ceiling's a lot higher on offense with the talent because they've got a quarterback now who can just is better, a more talented quarterback than Stetson Bennett. For all the things Stetson Bennett was good at, for like the ability he had in clutch situations, he certainly made some really clutch throws when Georgia needed to at times. I don't think anyone's going to deny that Carson Beck is a better quarterback, or at least has way more potential than Stetson Bennett. I know McConkey left the game a bit banged up again. The Georgia defense, though, Georgia's going to end up in a shootout at some point this year where things might not go their way because their defense is not very Georgia-like. The game Saturday coming up is going to be fascinating because the Tennessee home road splits are insane. I don't think Tennessee's going to win, but it'll be another nice challenge for Georgia. That SEC title game is starting to look like it's going to be a banger of a game.
Oh my God, Bama's playing so well. That game should be just awesome.
Florida State 27, Miami 20. Does it kind of feel like Florida State is playing with fire a bit?
Yeah.
The ACC isn't very good, and Florida State hasn't really looked elite for long periods of time since the second half of the LSU game. Emory Williams got the start for Miami at quarterback and was just 8 of 23 passing. It seems like Miami's only chance to hang around was to hit big plays, and they hit a handful, and that was really it. That a 34th percentile EPA per play and an 8th percentile success rate and lost by 7. Florida State has an FCS game this week, and they end with a Florida team that's an absolute mess defensively, but Graham Mertz might not be awful, by the way. And then it looks like Louisville in the ACC title game. Just not sure that someone can take them down before the playoff, and I love their receivers, but this team looks less than elite, and it feels like if they end up as like a 3 seed playing Michigan or a 4 seed playing Georgia, they're going to get probably well stomped out in that game.
I just I don't know where the team that we saw play LSU has gone. Maybe that was partially because LSU's defense is so bad too, but they looked faster that night. They looked just like a better football team. And I don't know if complacency is starting to set in. I don't know if they're going through the motions a little bit because the schedule's died down so much, but this isn't a team that, we can say Georgia's going through the motions because Georgia's won 2 straight national championships and been to however many straight playoffs. Florida State hasn't won anything yet outside of they won their games this year, but they haven't won an ACC in a while. They haven't gone to a college football playoff. There's some flipping into neutral kind of starting to feel like, and sometimes when you get yourself into the playoff, when you get yourself into a conference championship game and you've kind of geared down to neutral, it's really hard to gear back up when you really need to. And I think Florida State's a good football team, but they have not earned the benefit of the doubt of a Georgia team or even an Alabama team because of past year's performance. I'm not sure they're going to be able to get out of neutral. I'm not sure they're going to be able to gear back up because, from what we've seen the last couple of weeks, this would have been the moment to do that. A rivalry game at home against the Miami team that's not great but good. This is all right. Let's gear back up. We got to get going. We got to go for conference championship week. Nope. It was hang on for dear life.
Yeah. It just something doesn't really feel right. And again, they've that Boston College game. At a certain point, you can't just say, "Oh, well, that was an outlier, one bad performance." It was Boston College. It was the Pitt game. They screwed around for large chunks of that game, and I know that they've been dealing with some injuries here and there. They just kind of feel like they're one of those teams. If they run the table, they're going to be in, and that's fine. If you're a Power 5 team, you go undefeated, you make the playoff. I don't have a problem with that. But if you were to tell me that any team, if they're number 4, if you want to say Georgia, Michigan, let's just say they're number 4 behind, let's say Washington's number 3, Michigan, Georgia 1 and 2, whatever order. If th're 4, team 5 through 20, I'm I don't know, Florida State, I'm not just convinced is going to win that game. So
no.
Who knows? We'll see there. 2 big ones in the Pac-12 as we continue hurtling towards a rematch that I think everybody wants to see in Washington and Oregon. Washington 35, Utah 28. Probably should have won by more because of the absolute boneheaded fumble on the pick 6. First off, just make sure you're in the end zone in general, but usually those happen at the half-yard line. That just dropped it at the 3.
It wasn't even close, Stan. I said the same exact thing. I was watching the game with one of my buddies, and we both kind of saw it in real time. And then obviously they didn't put the number up on the board yet. And then they you look at the replays, yeah, he was not even, it wasn't at the half-yard line. It wasn't at the goal line. It wasn't the 1. He was halfway in between the 5 and the goal line. And not only him, there was a guy following him who was kind of right on his tail, can understand how he didn't get it. But there was a lineman probably 10 yards back who probably pretty clearly should have seen it. He was the 3rd man in and just ran straight past the ball too. Now, I know they ended up getting a safety and, all's well that ends well, but that could have been really bad.
And nevertheless, turnovers aren't sticky. You need to be able to do something else well on defense, and it remains a concern for Washington. Bryson Barnes was able to do some things with his arm in this game. Like, we knew Utah was probably going to be able to run the ball, but Bryson Barnes was able to do some things with his arm. They consistently move the ball aside from those 2 turnovers. Washington's offensive ceiling is so high, but the floor on defense is pretty low for them and might be the downfall for them. Giving up almost 7 yards per play to a Utah offense that has struggled throwing the ball this year isn't encouraging when they still have to go up against guys like DJU this weekend and Cam Ward and then potentially Bo Nix again. Penix to Adunze is still a cheat code. Dylan Johnson ran the ball well again, talked about how he has become a really, really nice running back option for them. But when your defense is not reliable, you end up increasing the variance and outcomes a great deal. And it's just one of those things where Washington's going to be in shootouts and they're going to play games. They're going to be high scoring and weird things are going to happen. And I mean, Oregon State's going to be the most public side in the world. We'll talk about that game on Thursday, but like,
it's a tricky spot.
It just kind of really feels like everyone's predicting at some point Washington's deep. It just feels like every year there's a team that's in contention for the playoff, and it's like that team has a fatal flaw. There's something about that team that's going to cost them a game at some point, and you wait for it, and you wait.
Was Washington last year's USC?
It kind of to some degree, yeah. And it's just like, there it was. That's what happened. They finally like. They got bit because they didn't play. Their defense wasn't good enough. And, you know, again, we'll go into greater detail. It's just kind of some of the preliminary stuff I was looking at with the Oregon State game. Like, this is going to be a really, really, really tough game for them.
On the road, too. Like, Corvallis is a really tough place to play. And Oregon State is playing very good football. Like, I know they lost to Arizona in that tight game that they probably should have won if they don't run a fake field goal from like 4th and 8 on the 40. It would have been a 41-yarder. That was weird. Like, beat Colorado. They beat Stanford 62-17. Stanford obviously played Washington well and is not very good, but they've been playing better football as of late. Like, beat UCLA by double digits. They can put up points, and they can also play really good defense at times. And if Washington's offense isn't clicking, that game might actually get away from them.
I agree. The other big outcome, Oregon 36, USC 27. Shout out to the Trojans. Great teams cover. I don't want to talk about this game, though. I want to talk about the Heisman because I feel like we do the same thing with USC every week.
Yeah, they're just kind of sad at this point.
Yeah. I hate the Heisman Trophy, Matt. We've talked about how much we love Marvin Harrison Jr., and I think he's the best player in the country, but let's assume for a minute he loses to Michigan and is no longer a serious contender to win. Does it make any sense why Bo Nix is minus money to win the Heisman and Jaden Daniels is around 700-ish right now? I bet Jaden Daniels, actually, I bet him this week at plus 800. I understand LSU's record is not very good, but this dude just had the first ever 350 pass yard, 200 rush yard game in FBS history. He was not the reason why they lost any of the games they lost. In fact, if you go back and look at him, aside from an interception in the FSU game, he was awesome in all three of them. In particular, he was awesome against Ole Miss. He was playing awesome against Alabama before he got hurt. He's been great in every game he has played this year. Bo Nix is a fantastic football player, but listen to this from our good friend Chris Felica. Jaden Daniels leads the nation in total offense by 57 yards per game at 408.2, which is more than 80 teams average this season.
Insane.
He's accounted for 38 touchdowns, which is more than 81 teams have scored. Does this make sense? Marvin Harrison Jr. is the best player in college football, but Jaden Daniels has been the best player in college football this year.
I know what you're saying, and I've been so hard on the train of if Marvin Harrison Jr. keeps going off and they beat Michigan, I think he should get the Heisman, and I'm probably going to stick to that for right now at least, but Jaden Daniels is as deserving as Marvin Harrison. He is more, and this is no offense to Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr., because they're having fantastic seasons, and they both deserve to be finalists in New York. Jaden Daniels is having a better season, and he shouldn't be punished because his defense is all-time bad. Like, he's been fantastic this year, and none of the 3 losses are even remotely close to being his fault. At the Alabama game, they were tied or down a score when he got hurt and left, and like they had 28 points already. He probably would have scored another touch. Got let him do another touchdown. Like this notion that it's becoming the same thing, similar to the NFL MVP. It's just like, well, we have to give it to the quarterback on the best team or the undefeated team or the one that's going to the playoff. Like, going to the college football playoff should not be a prerequisite to win the Heisman Trophy. It just shouldn't. You should be the best player in college football. And Jaden Daniels and Marvin Harrison Jr. have been the 2 best players in college football.
So to some degree, like giving the MVP award to the best quarterback and to the best quarterback on the best team in the NFL makes sense because again, you can take the definition of most valuable however you want. I mean, I think our thought process on that, particularly in baseball, has changed over time. But this is the most outstanding player in college football.
Yeah,
it has
fair
nothing
enough.
to do with the record
That's true. Good
of
point.
your team, and it shouldn't, but it often does, and we know that. The thing that's gonna ding Jaden Daniels here is the fact that he's just not going to play championship weekend. They're going to be off, and the LSU PR staff is going to get their money's worth. They're going to earn their salary that weekend. He'll definitely, I'm assuming game day is going to be in Atlanta for Georgia, Alabama. He's got to be on the set for that game at some point if you're the LSU PR staff. Hell, remember last year when Nick Saban didn't force his way, but they interviewed Nick Saban at
the halftime show of the Big Ten championship
game on Friday. Why, if you're LSU, are you not pushing to get Jaden Daniels an interview during halftime of the Pac-12 title? Like, isn't that even a better time if Nix and Penix are both still undefeated, or if Nix only has the one loss and Penix only has one loss or undefeated? Like, aren't you trying to get Jaden Daniels that interview at that point? Like, I'm just like, what food for thought as we move on into the season, into the last couple of weeks. And then the big news from this weekend, Jimbo Fisher finally. The long saga of when will Texas A&M move on and how are they going to pay the buyout? It is done. Jimbo Fisher was fired from Texas A&M. Before I get in specifically to that, do you think that Zach Arnett was like watching TV, maybe watching film, maybe eating breakfast on Sunday morning, saw that Jimbo Fisher got fired and was like, yeah, I probably should go start packing up my office because you can't really lose by 41 points to a coach who just lost his job and expect that you're going to keep your job. But nevertheless, Sam Kahn from The Athletic puts it into the context for Jimbo Fisher. He got an extension in September 2021. Remember, in 2020, they almost make the playoff. There were some rumors that after Ed Orgeron was fired, they were going to try to the LSU was going to try to come poach him because the AD at LSU was the guy who brought Jimbo Fisher to Texas A&M. But so he signed a contract extension in September of 21. Since then, Texas A&M 19-15 overall, 10-13 versus the SEC, 12-14 versus the Power 5, 4-10 in one-score games. They've lost 7 straight, 1-9 in true road games. They've lost 9 straight. $19.4 million up front from the A&M Donors Fund, and then $7.3 million a year for 8 years out of the athletics budget, which is the only thing that I actually think is newsworthy in this is where does that money come from? Does it just come from football, or is there another sport, or is there someone else at Texas A&M whose life is going to be affected because that's going to be $7.3 million for the next 8 years? That's just gone. So that is something I'm curious about. The early list from Pete Thamel the other day, in his tweet said, the early list of potential names for Texas A&M, knowing money is no object. Lane Kiffin, Mike Elko, Mike Norvell, Dan Lanning, Jeff Traylor, Chris Kleiman, Cliff Kingsbury, and Kalen DeBoer. That would be the best result ever.
So
Dan
funny.
Lanning had a Dan Lanning had a great denial. Mike Norvell came out, said he's not all that interested. Kalen DeBoer gave a non-denial denials. Kalen DeBoer is basically angling for more money. Lane Kiffin.
I don't think Kalen DeBoer is a sexy enough name for them.
Well, that's going to be the interesting thing because the two easy names here are Mike Elko and Jeff Traylor. Like Mike Elko was the defensive coordinator, did a really, really good job there, goes to Duke. Jeff Traylor is a guy who is beloved around the state of Texas by high school coaches, a former high school coach. He's at UTSA, but it's like, is the Duke head coach good enough for them at Texas A&M? If he's not, is the UTSA coach good enough?
I think Elko would be simply because of his success as the defensive coordinator. If he had not been A&M's defensive coordinator, I would say no, they would not be happy with the Duke head coach. But it seems like they are, like A&M fans were bummed when Elko left and have missed him since he's been gone. So like I think that is the one smaller school hire, and I'm talking about a Power 5 school, but smaller school hire that like A&M fans would be okay with.
Potentially. Billy Lucci, who's one of the connected guys from TexAgs, he said he doesn't think they're going to make a splash hire. I don't know, man. Like, are people going to be okay? I think they're going to make a run at Lane Kiffin, and like, to me, that's a bad. Just Elko, if not Elko, hire Traylor. I have my questions about whether or not Chris Kleiman would fit at a school like that. And then if not, if they end up with Cliff King, if they botch this so bad, they actually do legitimately end up with Cliff Kingsbury. It is the greatest bag fumble in the history of college football.
It'd be hilarious.
It'd be just absolutely incredible. But that job's open. Just talked about Mississippi State's open. Andy Avalos at Boise State got fired. And then Brady Hoke with the you can't fire me.
I'm going to retire. He retired.
You can't fire me. I retire.
I'm interested to see where Mississippi State goes because that's just it's an interesting job. Like, it's obviously not a top tier SEC job, but like, I mean, rest in peace. Mike Leach showed that like, if you do a good job at Mississippi State, you can make that into an 8-9 win team a year. And like, that's a pretty nice place to live in the SEC. You're going to get SEC money. You are never really going to be expected to win the SEC West. And if you win 8 games a year, your fan base is thrilled, but you're also an SEC coach. It's a very rare spot.
Yeah. I think
never been to Starkville though, so I don't know.
Bet Online had odds up for it, and obviously, like those kind of markets, don't bet those markets. They're kind of just put up for show. But they have why am I blanking on the guy? Jamie Chadwell is the favorite, which would be a good hire. Like they went unconventional with Leach. Jamie Chadwell is a guy who can flat out coach. Liberty's going to win the conference. I mean, as much as I would love for our beloved New Mexico State Aggies to win the Conference USA title game, Liberty's a 14-point favorite in that game. So Jamie Chadwell probably going to be the guy, like going to be on the short list there. Mississippi State's a tough place to. It's just like they could like. I don't think that he would leave to go there, but like Chris Kleiman to me at a place like Mississippi State makes more sense than a place like Texas A&M, a place where you're never going to get the elite recruit. So you're going to be able to just have to coach your ass off. So a guy like that would be good. Like, I don't know what their list is going.
You think they'd call Dan Mullen?
I doubt it. I think Dan
come on home.
I think Dan Mullen is very happy doing TV and getting paid to just not coach football.
Yeah, maybe.
He looks so much happier now.
But coaches are weird.
They are weird.
Coaches are weird. And like him, oddly enough, being happy on TV means deep down he's unhappy that he's not coaching and mad all the time. I don't know.
Maybe I don't know, man.
You should. It might not work, but you should make the phone call. Like, hey, man, just come on home. We're in the era of reruns and remakes. Just run it back, remake it with Dan Mullen.
Reboot it.
Reboot it with Dan Mullen.
Like the Frasier reboot that's supposed to be terrible.
I don't think I'm gonna watch that.
I would have, but it was supposed to be awful. Anyway,
Urban Meyer plus 800 for A&M. Just go full heel if you're Texas A&M and embrace how much everybody hates you and hire Urban Meyer. That'd be hilarious.
Trust me, the interest would be there on their end. I don't think Urban Meyer wants to go coach there.
No, I don't think so either.
Actually, my other thought on this with Texas A&M, just for curiosity's sake, please, for my edification, pretty please. I want Texas A&M to find out how much money Kirby Smart would say no to. I just want them to call and say 100 million, 200 million, 300 million. Like, I just want to see. He wouldn't leave. Like, he wouldn't leave. But I just would be curious. How much money would Kirby Smart say no to?
Dan, I'm scrolling through some of these the A&M coaches' names on Bet Online. You scroll down far enough, they have the most ridiculous names. They're just trying to goat people into bet. Dan Campbell is on this list.
That's actually not the craziest idea in the world because he is an alumnus.
Okay, but he's not leaving the Detroit Lions.
No, but like that.
Bill Belichick is on this list.
See, exactly. So Dan Campbell makes more sense than like Belichick and Jim Harbaugh. Although Jim Harbaugh, if you really think about it, just from like a personality standpoint, Jim Harbaugh would fit in so well with those weirdos.
Oh, yeah.
Also, Dabo Swinney didn't say no when he was asked about it today. He gave a long-winded answer about how he's happy at Clemson and blah, 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 blah. Didn't say no. Another guy who's a weirdo who would make a lot of sense.
Dabo already being a cult guy, fitting in with an already built-in cult makes a lot of sense.
That's the problem, is that he might not be okay with not being the biggest part of the cult there. Anyway, we move on. Week 12 coming up, starting tonight. We have some midweek match. We have 3 games tonight, Matthew.
Underdogs and overs.
Akron.
Didn't go as well last week. Did not go as well last week, but that happens. I mean, the system's going to have some down nights.
Once we get through all these games, I'm going to tell you I'm not really feeling the system, and for one reason, and I'll get to it. I'll explain in a minute. Akron at Eastern Michigan. Eastern Michigan, a 4.5-point favorite. The total 39.5. Western Michigan at Northern Illinois. Northern Illinois, a 4.5-point favorite. The total 54.5. The other game tonight, the best game of the night, Toledo at Bowling Green, a rivalry game. Bowling Green catching 9.5 at home. 50.5 the total.
Underdog and over, Dan.
Tomorrow, Buffalo at Miami of Ohio. Miami's an 8.5-point favorite. The total 40.5 there. If Miami wins, they clinch a spot in the MAC title game to play Toledo. And then Central Michigan at your Ohio Bobcats. The Bobcats, a 9.5-point favorite. Total 46.5. The reason I'm not necessarily feeling the system so much this year, Matt, is it really does kind of feel like Miami, Toledo, and Ohio are just a lot better than everyone else in the conference this year.
Yeah, and I know I might stray from the system and take Miami laying the points at Buffalo tomorrow.
Miami's kind of a wagon. They lost by 4 points to Toledo at home, but they're not Miami's been pretty good this year. Toledo, by the way, right now it's the AAC champ is going to be in the what's it called, the group of five, the New Year's Six Bowls, which people think it's gonna be SMU, but Toledo, if they run the table, they're only gonna have one loss to Illinois by 2 points. Everyone kind of thought this team was gonna be really, really good this year, and that has proved to be. Tomorrow or on Friday night, because today is Tuesday, this isn't Thursday. Friday night, Colorado at Washington State. Washington State a 4.5-point favorite. The total 64.5. On Saturday, Michigan, their second to last game, they take on Maryland. Maryland's a 19.5-point underdog at home. Total is 50.5. Tulane on the road at FAU. Does Tom Herman have any magic there? 9.5 points is the spread. Tulane favored 47.5. Louisville at Miami. Miami is a 1.5-point home dog at 46.5. I bet Louisville the other day in this game. I think Miami's going to pack it in. Utah at Arizona. Last week, DraftKings had Arizona favored in this game, and seeing Arizona favored over Utah in football is jarring.
It's really weird.
At FanDuel right now, though, Utah is now favored 1.5 is the spread, 44.5 is the total. App State at James Madison, the college game day game of the week, which is an absolute fucking joke. Embarrassing on ESPN's part. They're not in Corvallis this weekend. James Madison, a 10.5-point favorite, total 55.5. North Carolina at Clemson. North Carolina technically still alive for the ACC title game. My buddy was texting saying, should he bet North Carolina 100-1 to win the ACC? I was like, there's just too much that has to happen for them to make it. So Clemson's a 6.5-point favorite. The total's 58.5. North Carolina State's playing Virginia Tech in Blacksburg. Both teams technically still alive, but in North Carolina, VA Tech is Va-Tech's a 2.5-point favorite. I only bring this up, Matt, because Virginia Tech 4-2 in conference, all 4 conference wins, blowouts. The losses were road blowouts at Louisville and FSU. I have no idea if Brent Pry's a good coach, if he's going to do a good job there, but there's been progress this year. And
this year 2 for him.
Year 2. I don't know if we can make them into a contender, but I will just say this: college football is better when Lane Stadium is a house of horrors for opposing teams. So that's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping
need him to be the guy that gets them back to an 8-9 win team a year. Exactly. Who we get one home game, we get one night game a year. Where they're the college football Saturday, and Clemson, Florida State, Notre Dame has to come in there and play a night game at Lane Stadium, and you get to hear Enter Sandman at night, and you get the goosebumps. We need that once a year.
You need it.
Don't need them to go to a playoff. Just need them to be that team.
Exactly. I agree.
And guess what? Virginia Tech fans would love that. They don't need to go to a playoff. They're fine. They'd be fine with that.
The way things have gone, you're right there. For my money, Matt, the best uniform game in college football this weekend, UCLA at USC, when they both wear their home uniforms. I don't think there's anything prettier in college football. I mean, it's not at the Rose Bowl, which is just would make it even better, but the UCLA blue versus the USC red is such a beautiful matchup. USC 6.5-point favorite, the total 65.5. Georgia at Tennessee. Tennessee a 10.5-point underdog, 58.5. Did you see they have an ace in the hole in this game, Matt?
No.
The one and only Dolly Parton will be in attendance in this game at Rocky Top.
Do we need to look up their record all time when Dolly Parton is in attendance?
I wish I knew that. Knew that. Fun game in the Mountain West. UNLV at Air Force. Air Force 3.5-point favorite. Total 47.5. The Sunflower State Showdown. Kansas State at Kansas. Kansas a 9.5-point home underdog. Total 56.5. The game of the week. Washington at Oregon State. The Beavers a 1.5-point favorite. This is a flip. Washington opened at 1.5-point favorite. They're now 1.5-point dog. Total 63.5. And then
I just was thinking about with that game because that's the night game, right? For on ABC, that's the Fowler Herbstreit game.
I don't know if it's a Fowler Herbstreit game, but sure.
I believe it is because I thought I saw Herbstreit actually tweet that. I could be wrong, but I think that's the 6:30 ABC game, or for you 7:30. This is now back-to-back weeks where they're doing game day on the East Coast and making Herbstreit fly 4.5, 5 hours all the way out to the West Coast. I would be fucking furious again if I got to hop on a flight from, what was it, last week? He went east to west And this week he's got to do it again, go from James Madison out to Corvallis. Like, that'd just be annoying. Guy travels.
Allow me to play the world's tiniest violin for a guy who gets.
I'm just saying, be annoying. I'd be upset.
Private jet. Also, it's a travesty that College Game Day is not there. Like ESPN.
Yeah, they should be.
ESPN. This is. I'm not going to get into it. It's just going to make me angry. Texas at Iowa State.
I don't know if this is like a theory, but could it have something to do with like they don't know how many shows Corso has left and 4-hour flight out where he's from? He's in Orlando, so flight from from Orlando to Corvallis is a lot more difficult on him than it is to James Madison. That's just that could be totally off, but that's the only thing that makes sense to me is they want to make life as easy on him for however much longer he's going to be doing the show, which might still be next year, but he's obviously on limited schedules now.
So I don't know that has anything to do with it.
Might not. I was just there was an idea that popped in my head.
But so the two things that I think factored in more. One, the Jonas, they're having a Jonas Brothers concert, like a performance by the Jonas Brothers live on the show. I'd imagine it's just easier for them to get to Harrisonburg than it is Corvallis, which means they're also, if they're touring or whatever, they're probably on the East Coast. I'm assuming that's part of it. And two, I really think this is ESPN tucking their tail and hiding from the fact that they're responsible for the Pac-12 dying and
maybe
for just the piss poor way they handled the controversy earlier this year with McAfee and Corso and all that stuff over the Washington State, Oregon State game. I think it's ESPN really just kind of tucking their tail and not forcing or not taking on the criticism that they deserve. And they're not the only ones who deserve criticism for it, but they do. Fox does, the Pac-12 does, like a lot of people do, but ESPN does. And they kind of showed their ass when the whole thing with Corso and McAfee about the Washington State, Oregon State game happened. So I think that's why they're there. Anyway, I bet Iowa State against Texas. Texas' running back Jonathan Brooks tore his ACL. Quinn Ewers didn't look fully healthy the other day. Iowa State's always been a tough place for Texas.
What's the line?
It's now 7.5. I bet it at 8.5. And as long as Texas cannot close out games, I think you always have to be a little bit skeptical about what they're going to do. So a little bit of a happiness hedge, I'm sure, but like they're just struggling. Like if you can just what you should probably do is bet Texas first half and then other team full game. The way that it's gone, because it's now. They tried to blow a 21-point lead against Houston. They tried to blow the game against Kansas State. They tried to blow the game against TCU. Fortunately for Texas, BYU was just so bad. They finished that game off. But Iowa State really, really likes beating Texas. I mean, everyone does, but Matt Campbell in particular, he can basically.
Iowa State likes being spoiler to a lot of teams, not just Texas. I feel like Oklahoma a couple of years ago, Oklahoma State when it was Brandon Weeden there when they were making their I feel like that's a common theme in the Big 12 is Iowa State ruining someone's season.
I don't hate a money line sprinkle on Iowa State, but I like the points there. One last thing before we go, because we're not going to talk about this game on Thursday, and we don't have point spreads for these games. Matt, the D2 playoffs start this weekend, and there's a coach in the state of Michigan who is actually being treated unfairly, unlike the man up in Ann Arbor. The Division II title game is held at the McKinney ISD.
He's the victim.
Huh? Yeah, I know.
He's the victim.
The D2 title game is held at the McKinney ISD Stadium, which is a high school stadium in Texas. Ferris State last year won their second straight D2 title, 41-14 over my beloved Colorado School of Mines. Despite explicitly being told not to, a couple of Ferris State players lit up victory cigars after the game. Being that this is a high school stadium, it has a strict no smoking policy. The NCAA decided to punish Ferris State's coach, Tony Anise. They didn't fine him or suspend him for regular season games. No, they decided this like after the title game last year, like early this calendar year, that he would be suspended for Ferris State's next playoff game whenever that was, which is ridiculous. But what makes it even more ridiculous, Matt, Ferris State has to play their arch rival Grand Valley State in the first round. Ferris State beat GVSU in the playoffs last year. This year in the regular season, Ferris State was down 35-0, got it to 35-28 before losing 49-28. Bill Connolly from ESPN, his D2 SP Plus rankings have Grand Valley State, the best team in D2, and Ferris as the third best. The second best team, Harding, got the seed in this region, so it's likely whoever wins this game will get to play Harding, and then the winner of all of that region will probably play Colorado School of Mines in the semifinals, which is the fourth best team in SP Plus. So if you don't really understand how all these teams are basically on the same side of the bracket, at the smaller level of college football and college athletics in general, brackets are put together with travel in mind first and foremost. If a trip is under a certain amount of miles, teams have to travel by bus, which is a lot cheaper than flying. So you will see geography as kind of the driving force behind the brackets at the D2, D3 level, and even the FCS level to some degree when they can do that. So we have 2 of the 3 best teams in D2, arch rivals, playing each other in the first round of the playoffs. One of them without their coach because his players smoked victory cigars after they won the national title. If that's not all the proof you need to abolish the NCAA, I don't know what more you need.
Shout out Ferris State, Big Rapids, Michigan.
Yeah, I mean it's a battle. 2 great Michigan programs because obviously Grand Valley State also a Michigan school as well. Harding I think is in Kansas or Oklahoma. Nevertheless, I don't know if those games are usually webcast, so you can go check that out. It's a 1:00 game. I would highly encourage you to do so because those games are usually pretty competitive. So check that out. We'll be back on Thursday. We're going to figure out a time, but I know Florida Phil
I think he said morning, so I'd imagine that 9 a.m. for me, 10 a.m. for you guys is probably the most likely time slot will pop on your screens on Thursday.
And we will, 2 more weeks. Excuse me. Then we'll do championship week. Then we'll do our bowl. Figuring out the bowl schedule with his schedule is going to be a pain in the ass too.
Yeah, we'll figure that out.
A million bowl games, but we'll figure it all out. Nevertheless, we appreciate everyone who's watched us, tuned in, and checked us out. We will talk.
I debated having a Sharon Moore type. I love the shit out of you, man. To Phil to send off the episode because he's not here, but I can't do that. I can't do that. But I thought about it.
You got to get those like things that they spray in their eyes to help make them cry when they can't. The actors who aren't good enough to cry on camera. That would have been awesome.
Hit me with the spray.
Yeah, just hit them with the menthol spray. Nevertheless, we'll be back on Thursday. We appreciate everyone tuning in. We will talk to you guys then.